Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of 1990's Represent. We wrapped up the 1998 Represent series at the end of last year. I had a lot of fun doing that for the 20th anniversary of 1998. Doing that series made me really kind of nostalgic for just the 1990s, like the rest of that decade. So this series going forward is going to be covering the other 9 years of the 1990s. We'll definitely have some 1998 content in there as well, but we're going to do it in the exact same way we did the 1998 series, where we'll be covering music, movies, and video games. We'll do each year will be broken up into 3 episodes. So we'll do, for example, we're starting with 1990. We'll be doing an album, a music album, then moving into a movie, then moving into a video game, all from 1990. We'll then move into 1991, do the exact same thing, and then once we get to 1999, again, same thing there. We'll then cycle back to 1990 and start the process all over again. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, but we're starting off with an album for 1990, and we are taking a look at Violator by Depeche Mode. An amazing album. I actually own it here. I've had it on vinyl for a while. I think this is like a 2007 like reissue or re-release. I got some notes about the album, and then we're just going to discuss the album, its kind of and its impact and things like that. So let me just get my notes here for it. All right, so Depeche Mode, Violator, first released March 19th, 1990. This is their 7th studio album. And when they went into just reading about this album, they mentioned doing a lot of like pre-production before an album. And with Violator, they did a very minimal amount of pre-production. Like those pre-production meetings would be like, let's discuss how we want the album to sound. Let's kind of like build it out like that. And I think in my research, it said that they got kind of bored approaching music that way. So they went in with much less pre-production, and they had like some like very like simple demos laid out. So they were then able to kind of have a little bit more freedom and a little bit more creative, not necessarily creative control, but they were able to kind of just like take things in a different direction during that. I have some quotes here that I saved about the pre-production here. Let me bring them up here. Yeah, so it was Alan Wilder quote was quoted as saying, quote, "Usually we begin the making of a record by having extensive pre-production meetings where we decide what the record will actually sound like, then go into a programming studio. This time we decided to keep all pre-production work to a minimum. We were beginning to have a problem with boredom in that we felt we reached a certain level of achievement in doing things a certain way." And then Martin Gore also was quoted as saying, "Over the last 5 years, I think we've perfected a formula. My demos, a month in a programming studio, etc., etc. We decided that our first record of the 1990s ought to be different." So yeah, they went in with kind of minimal amount of pre-production, and I think it ended up working out really well. This is like probably easily my favorite Depeche Mode album. There's some just classics on here, like Personal Jesus is on this one. Enjoy the Silence. And we'll get to the track list a little bit later in the episode. But those basic demos then allowed them, like I mentioned earlier, to kind of change up the direction of songs. I remember reading that Enjoy the Silence was supposed to be more like a ballad, and with them just using kind of like a very rough, very simple demo of that, it turned it into a much more up-tempo song. And that's easily one of like Enjoy the Silence is, it's right up there with Personal Jesus for me and a few others as being like just like top tier Depeche Mode music. Let's see. And to me, this definitely feels like a 1990s album. I've noticed kind of in the early years of a new decade that the previous decade's influence is still very much felt, especially like in like music, and I guess pretty much all media, but music specifically, I think. And this album doesn't really feel like it carries over a lot of the like mid to late '80s kind of sound. It sounded very different compared to a lot of other kind of similar music that was coming out in the very early '90s. Because usually you have like a decade will actually kind of like run a little over, like decade is of course 10 years, but those you definitely feel the influence of the prior decade um, up to like maybe like the like kind of like a couple years into the new decade. So there's kind of like a little bit of like spillover or carryover in a way. And with this album, it didn't really feel like there was a lot of carryover, if any, from the '80s. It definitely feels like very much an album from the 1990s, and I think that kind of goes back to them saying how they just went in with not a lot of pre-production to kind of be able to just be a little bit more creative. Like I said, like they had ended up getting kind of bored with the way they were recording music, or at least writing music up to that point. This album is just very well received critically. There's just like a ton of great reviews on it. It's definitely one of, like I said, my favorite album from them, and easily just like one of the best albums of probably the decade from in the '90s, and then probably my favorite album from them overall. There was a really cool story I remember reading. I was streaming this on Apple Music, and there's sometimes a little bit of information that'll pop up about the album. And apparently there was going to be like a party, or like a listening party, or like a performance at a Warehouse Records store in LA. And they, I think they said they expected maybe like a couple thousand people to show up to it. It ended up being that over like about 17,000 people ended up showing up to this record store basically, and the show had to get canceled, and the band had to be evacuated just due to there being such a huge crowd. Apparently, like riots broke out, like small, like not necessarily full scale riots, but the article I was reading about it said there was riots. The thing kind of in Apple Music's information about it kind of like mentioned riots as well. And this is definitely like this album definitely got them a much more like broader like appeal, or like they definitely kind of like this album definitely put them on the map more than they already were up to that point. So that was that. We're going to take a look at the the album here. Got this is the 2007 re-release of it. The version I listened to on Apple Music actually has some extra tracks, but there is that, and then you've got the insert there as well. We're going to look at the track list. We're going to look at it on the back of this actually. So the track list is right along the bottom here on this one. And the version on Apple Music, there is another version that has some bonus tracks on it. I ended up listening to that one as well. But this is kind of like the original 1990 track listing. The extra tracks aren't included on this one. But track, does it go numerical? Yeah, it goes numerical. It doesn't just go to side A and side B. So track 1 is World in My Eyes. Excellent song. A very nice way to start the album out. Track 2 is Sweetest Perfection, which is pretty good. Track 3 is Personal Jesus, and that's a classic. I think the first time I ended up hearing this album in its like entirety was like much later, but I remember hearing a couple tracks off of this before that, and I remember Personal Jesus being featured somewhat prominently in the in Grand Theft Auto. I think it was San Andreas. I think Personal Jesus showed up on the, forget the name of the station, but it was whatever station was doing like the alternative rock station. Personal Jesus shows up there. So track 3 is Personal Jesus. Track 4 is Halo. Track 5 is Waiting for the Night. Track 6 is Enjoy the Silence. And Enjoy the Silence just starts off very up-tempo, very upbeat. It's just an amazing song. I think it's like between that and Personal Jesus, those are probably my two favorites. Track 7 is Policy of Truth. That's also an amazing song. Track 8 is Blue Dress, and track 9 is Clean. And I don't know if it's going to focus, but there is the track listing along there. Doesn't look like it's going to focus on that. But we have that there. Like I said, it's an amazing album, and it's a really cool way to start the 1990s because, like I mentioned earlier, this album doesn't feel like it has any of the kind of carryover from the 1980s. Like a lot of bands that were putting out stuff in the early 90s, especially if they were bands that were around in the 80s, a lot of that 80s influence kind of carried over. It didn't really seem like it did that here with Depeche Mode. They kind of started off very fresh, like I said, changing up how they do their music at that point. I think really paid off because it felt like a completely new, not new genre, but it definitely didn't feel like it was an older Depeche Mode album necessarily. But Violator is awesome. I think there's a few different versions of it out now. This is the original 1990, not a 1990 pressing, but the 1990 track listing. If you stream it now, there's probably going to be some bonus tracks on there, which are also very cool. But that is going to do it for this video. We'll be back again in a few days covering a movie from 1990. I've already watched it. I don't want to get too much away about it, but it's going to be a good time. And then after that, we'll be back with like another 1990s video game, and then we'll go into 1991 and all the way through the rest of the decade, and then cycle back to 1990 and all the way through again. There's going to be a ton of videos in this series, so it should be a lot of fun. But that's going to do it for now. So remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'll see you again next time. Thanks again for watching. Take care and have a good one. See ya.